All right. Well, we're live, and welcome to another Account-Based Friday. We got a special format, special guest today, Neil Pacero, and gosh, I have known Neil for multiple decades. I hate to even admit that, but gosh, when I think of Neil, I think of so many things. I think of him as kind of the sales leader for marketers, and really having that mindset around how marketers should act and think and respond. Yet he has been on the sales side. In fact, back in the day, Neil was my very first Sirius rep. I think back when Sirius was 5 people deep. So you kind of sparked the whole concept out in the Bay Area back in the day. But Neil, really, really excited to have you join us today. Thank you for investing time.
Oh, John, I'm glad to be here. And gosh, I remember the first time we talked. Do you remember what you said when you picked up the phone when I reached you at 6:30 in the evening on a Thursday night?
Probably you were persistent in your ability to reach out, because I remember you definitely reached out a number of times, and I'm like, who is this Neil guy?
Ah, yes. I remember you said, I thought you were my wife calling. Lots of great memories, John. Thank you very much for your support in the early days of Serious Decisions. You were one of the early believers in what we were doing. And yeah, gosh, decades later, here we are.
Yeah, who would have thought? Who would have thought? And you've been kind of the thought leader from a marketer's perspective and selling into marketers. And things have really shifted here and changed over the last couple of years. I'm curious, what have you seen in terms of trends? And I know we've got a couple articles we can pull up. Maybe we could talk about that. But what are you seeing right now with kind of the state of sales?
Well, there is a huge evolution that has happened inside corporate America in the last year, especially in the last 2 years. We've got a whole series of trends that our great friend Joe Galvin leads to the conclusion that everything's changed, but nothing's different. People are working from home. We've got extreme digitization. Information's available for all of our buyers out there. So over on the sales side, there's this need to be hyper tailored in each and every conversation that we have with a prospect so that we can break through the attention barrier, create value for them, and arm them to have the discussions inside their organizations that help us get engagement with the executive team all the way down to the functional users, and to power our champions to be able to do the work inside to help to get us in the door so that we can do work with that organization. So you take all that complexity and the traditional stuff like people, process, and the politics that have always existed in B2B. And we've got a lot of complexity on the selling side that we're up against, and we need a new kind of support from marketers, especially in the areas that our chief financial officer and our CEOs want to hear about, and that is our high profit revenue sector, our customers, where we are generating cash flow that keeps the business alive, and where the profit exists that pays for a lot of the work lower down in the funnel. So I've committed myself to understanding that for my whole career, and now with the Mega Deals team, are focused exclusively on the world's largest and most complex B2B deals. We work very closely with Hewlett Packard on their top 30 accounts all around the world, working with companies like Saab on multi-billion-dollar jet deals all around the world. That's a reactive strategy. People that we work with in the traditional B2B SaaS and technology space. And we're also spending a lot of our time in our proactive strategy working with energy tech companies. The world is in a radical change of how energy is moving around the world, where energy comes from and how we're using it. And over here, that's one of the most exciting things that's happened in a very, very long time. what an incredible blessing to live through the internet revolution and now this energy revolution that's happening. So large, complex deals in the climate tech space, is a really, really exciting place to play and to apply this past 30 years of work that you and I and so many other people have been pioneering in to, make these tools work, to support the process that enables the people to collaborate and improve the operations of our customer businesses.
Yeah, you got a lot to unpack there, and it's interesting how you were talking about profitability and cash flow and concepts that probably even 6 months ago we probably were not as marketers talking much about, right? It was almost growth at all costs, and now things have shifted pretty dramatically. A lot of attention, as you're saying, to maybe even CAC, cost of the acquisition of the pipeline. Like, what is this actually costing us? And before, people weren't really looking at that. So I think your instincts there of kind of that change, I could totally see what you're saying there. You also mentioned a number of different challenges that the mega advisory team has, mega deals as part of your advisory role, has put together. And I'm going to pull up an article here that I think you were part of, but maybe you could share a little bit about this article that we got on the screen. We've got some people that are going to be joining us via video as well, so I'm going to be adding them on. But it was 7 challenges of enterprise and mega deals. Maybe you could share, and I'll scroll through this and pass the link in chat as well for the people that are on LinkedIn that may get some value out of this.
Yeah, great. Thanks, John. Well, I'm hearkening back to the very first report that we did at Serious Decisions. Back in 2002, we wrote a piece called The 5 Barriers to Predictable Revenue. When I saw that for the first time, before I knew Rich and John and Tony and the early team, it really lit me up and it inspired me to join the team and to take these ideas out to the marketplace. Something similar has happened with this white paper that I'm really happy to be able to share with the crew here. And that is, we've been looking at large, complex B2B deals here at Mega Deals for 5+ years. My good friend and longtime ally, Chris Engman, many of you might know him from his work at Vendamore, the first IP targeting ABM company that came out in 2007. Chris and I and others, we've been thinking about large, complex deals. We've been doing large, complex deals for a long time. And we realized that, nobody was really writing very well about it. And there were very little tools that actually supported this process that we were seeing. It's much different than the enterprise sale that we commonly know. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, John. But the first big challenge that I think that's worth talking about with the audience is that what is B2B? Let's just zoom back for a second and break this down. What is business to business? If we really take a look at the numbers, mergers and acquisitions is the big chunk of what makes up B2B. That's where all the real, big dollars are, a huge portion of it. But what's next after that? It might be a surprise to know that our largest enterprise deals, these ones at the tippy top of the funnel, is where the next largest flow of dollars resides in the B2B space. And so, for example, we've done a lot of work with Ericsson. Chris and team sit in Stockholm, Sweden. A lot of their friends and colleagues there reside in Stockholm. And at Ericsson, for instance, they do billions and billions of dollars worth of telco gear sales per year. 17 customers make up a disproportionate number of their total revenue and an extremely high portion of their profit. Those deals are managed by only 4 people, meaning there's 4 rainmakers. They're not necessarily salespeople, but they're people on whose schedules these deals are wholly dependent. If these 4 people don't get involved in these deals, these huge deals don't happen. Now, that's a really extreme case at a $50 billion telco company. Well, last week I was speaking to a SaaS CEO. He's raised his A round. He's out doing business for the last couple of years. He told me 4 deals make or break his entire year as well. So in his case, he's the rainmaker. He's the person whose schedule moving deals forward is totally reliant on. And this is the biggest bottleneck to this second huge tranche of B2B revenue that's out there. And when Chris shared with me the early mega deals research, I was really, really surprised, John, because you and I, we've known each other spending all this time talking about the enterprise funnel and the waterfall and what I would call the marketing, then selling process, where I was kind of dumbstruck when Chris was explaining the topic of what a mega deal is, that in fact, there's a totally different motion that's required to drive these deals. And so my offer here today with the community here that we've got is, thinking about high profit deals, thinking about where cash flow comes from, being able to have that conversation with the CFO around who are our largest accounts? What is the motion that we're driving to find more of them, to expand those that we have? That's a really, really critical discussion to be having as we hit crunch time here, potentially heading into the biggest recession we've all known in our lives. So, happy to have a chance to dig into this a little bit deeper, but that's kind of the high level view. We have a huge rainmaker dependency in the large dollar volume of our B2B deal making. And not a lot of people are talking about it. There's very little research about it. And this piece is a really great primer that we can dig into.
Got it. Yeah, and just kind of scrolling down, a number of these are very catchy here. I think this one really caught my attention here. Of companies are too lead centric, with the marketing team spending too much money and other resources top of the funnel rather than partnering with sales. And in this environment that we're in right now, if you're not partnering with sales, you're kind of dead in the water. But I'm curious, like, what kind of research led to that conclusion, or what kind of trends are you starting to see there on that third bullet?
Yeah, great. So that's kind of the concept of this marketing then selling motion that you and I, have spent so much time in. The big aha for me is that there's actually another motion, and that is selling and marketing, almost taking that linear process that we know and turning it on its side. So we're running all programs, selling and marketing, kind of simultaneously across a very large audience of people in order to get the votes that help us to get in the door at the executive level, even sometimes at the shareholder level or at the community level outside of an organization. That's a really complex, area. There's so many people there. A normal mortal human can't do it. That's where the digital tools are incredibly powerful, but we're using them in sort of a linear fashion. Our thesis and what we've proven with my customers like Tata, Saab, and Hewlett Packard is you turn these tools on their side and you can drive large high profit deals. And that's really strategically important. Our CEOs and our CFOs want to hear about that. So that's really it in a nutshell. I'd say the other piece is number 2, John, and that is we've got a real big challenge in what our great friend, the notorious Joe Galvin, one of the top Serious Decisions Gartner analysts, now the head of research at Vistage, a CEO advisory network. Joe said to me his favorite top 10 hit that he ever had was what he called ICBM, Intercontinental Ballistic Marketing. He loves to say that. And isn't it funny? But isn't it true? Especially in times like this, where there's a crunch and people get nervous, product groups are all bombing into our customers. PR team is saying one thing. The executive team doing elite high-level deals, they're saying something else. Marketing and demand gen, all the messaging is all saying something different. Is it any wonder our customers are completely confused by our messaging, but also confused because they don't even know their own buying decision process. So messaging plus the customer buying decision process, not their buying journey, but the buying decision process that happens from the board all the way down to the functional users. This is an incredible amount of complexity that we've never really done the deep dive on in the work at Serious Decisions and other stuff that I've seen out there. And that's why I'm really proud to be able to share this. And I think this stuff really makes a difference. Get the messaging right, help your customers understand the decision that they're actually trying to navigate through, and you become a preferred vendor.
Yeah, and just on the messaging point, it's a really interesting one. And, let me push on that a little bit. 20 years ago or 10 years ago, you really didn't have the gongs or the chorus or the ability to record calls and get intelligence around the tone, the types of words that were being used by prospects. Back in the day, you had to physically go out on sales calls and physically travel from point to point for marketers to get any kind of sense of what's happening, with a buyer. These days, everything I find is typically recorded. So I guess what I'm a little surprised about is the messaging kind of process. I would think would be a little easier or should have improved over the years with all this technology, and at least marketers' ability to get recorded calls. I also know that sometimes, and don't take it the wrong way, but sometimes sales doesn't want to have marketing as part of their call. So by having it recorded, it's kind of a harmless environment, right? The marketer can't say or do anything wrong because they're not actually live on that conversation. It's asynchronous. But I'm curious, like, how do you see that factoring in, that meaning the technology of call recording? Is it impacting the messaging side at all?
I haven't spent a lot of time there, personally. I have seen Gong and Chorus out in the market for a long time. They've grown really, really fast. I mean, if you look at the numbers, these are very, very fast growing companies. So clearly there's perceived value in the marketplace. So I would leave it at that. That's the limits of my experience, just observing, the accelerated growth of the consumption of these tools. But I'm kind of the mind that we've been in a buying frenzy for a very, very long time in terms of this, crazy tech stack. I've been a part of that. I mean, I've sold many, many layers of that tech stack over the course of the career since leaving Serious Decisions in 2008. And so, I have a strong bias there that frankly, there's been a lot of money out there in the markets that's driven a lot of VC activity, and there's a lot of tools. A lot of them all look the same and sound the same in every category. That's a very challenging environment, and what I think we see is the vendor community has taken on a role of advisory in the last 5 or 10 years. John Miller and others have really led the charge in terms of content marketing. It's very advisory like. So the question really is, are we doing things right? That would be, sort of the common view of it. Or are we doing the right things? And I think that's a really, really important distinction to be talking about. Doing things right is a little more operational and tactical. The big question is, are we doing the right things? Does call recording really move the needle in our large deals? I would say resoundingly no. But what does move the needle is what we've been talking about for 20 plus years, and that is sales and marketing working at the hip together to create value for other people outside the organization. That's a breakthrough, believe it or not. People that are doing that really, really well are few and far between. We're blessed to have spent the last 5 years at Mega Deals working closely with the most productive B2B sales organizations in the world, and to learn what does work. And I'll share a little bit more about what works. And I'd also like to kind of hone in on really where we fit, because this isn't for everybody. And so there's a few distinctions here that I'd like to make, but let me just stop there and loop back to your question. Tools, there's a limit is how I would answer the question. Oh, I can't hear you, John. Is that me?
Every time I talk with the mute button on, you'd think after 3 years of a pandemic, I'd figure this out, but maybe in year 3 and 10, I'll figure it out. But,
this is a good point, John. Don't change the people, change the tools. We run into this all the time. This is what we just experienced here is the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The real problem is the users. It's not the tools, but nobody will ever admit that the users. It's a lot easier to blame the tool than it's easier to blame the golf club's golfer on bad performance. So,
hey,
but actually related to that,
let me zoom into where there's a really good fit.
Sure.
The mega deals discipline. We have 4 really key complexities that if one is dealing with, and we all are, I think, more and more are dealing with these 4 complexities. They are, number one, that we have to anchor our buying decision for our offer from way up high in the organization, the board, shareholders, the executive team, all the way down to the guy in the basement who's actually using the tools. We call him Stefan. So you've got to anchor this deal across the hierarchy of the organization. That's really, really complicated to do. One human being, a sales rep, has a very hard time doing that by themselves. We also have to anchor complex deals across a lot of functional areas. So we might have to deal with IT, we might have to deal with operations, we might have to deal with the executive office, we might have to deal with finance, legal. When we have that level of complexity, it ups how hard it is to make these deals happen, the complexity of them. And then if we have a really complicated offer that requires change management, professional services, plus our software, maybe even hardware, that's a really, really complicated thing for the buyer to consume and understand how to put together. And then finally, when the buyer's environment is super complicated, we may have, resistant people that just don't want change to begin with, plus a huge complicated stack of hardware, software, et cetera, that we're trying to work into. When you have those 4 complexities, you commonly have a really, really huge dependency on a few people in these deals. We call these the rainmakers. They're not necessarily just salespeople. They can be subject matter experts. Commonly, it's the CEO of the organization or the CTO, the brainchild of whose is the product. And these people need to get involved in these conversations to help customers understand what's going on and to lower the perceived risk for the customer as they're looking to make this buying decision. And one of the key things that these rainmakers do that average reps don't do, that marketing commonly doesn't do in the messaging, is help the buyer understand their own decision-making process, like the categories that they should be considering, the subcategories, and all the dimensions that lead to why you as a vendor actually is a really good fit. When one does that, and it's a very, very uncommon way of messaging through marketing and communicating in face-to-face meetings, you win a disproportionate number of deals by earning trust and providing that advisory capability to a customer. So that's a big aha for me. There's a lot there, but that is career changing for me. And I hope for other people out there. This is this type of thinking that is not best practice. It's totally uncommon. It's not documented, and it matters. So thanks for the chance here to be able to share it with folks and to unpack this a little bit more.
Yeah, I think there's a really good book you reminded me of, and I'll drop it in the chat here. And you may have read it before, The Challenger Customer. We had Jen Allen on from who's kind of a challenger customer evangelist, so to speak. And she's got a long storied history there, but it sounded very similar the way you were describing it, almost as if you're trying to find that person internally that's going to have the political capital to take your sales process and your initiative. You have to understand their buying process, and that person's almost like a shepherd or a Sherpa, the way I understand it. And it does require
Absolutely.
a lot of different messaging and approach, particularly for like a one-to-one or a very hyper-targeted, like the mega deals that you're talking about. It really requires a lot of care and feeding, but you need that person on the other side of the table to kind of guide you. Otherwise, from a marketing or sales perspective, you're just wasting time.
Yeah, well, we are huge fans of the Challenger team. Matt Dixon actually provided a quote for the front cover of the Mega Deals book. He's a fan of us and reciprocally. But there's a really, really big difference in what they're doing and what we're doing. We have created a unique orchestration methodology that helps to do a little bit of sales change management, but not much. There's a lot more change management on the marketing side, how marketers support the rainmakers. When you have that concentration of revenue in deals and the dependency on the rainmakers to make those deals happen, there's 4 things that teams need to do to drive more profitable deals. That's number 1 is to free up that rainmaker from any unnecessary tasks that they could be doing. And that includes, writing their own proposals, doing their own PowerPoints. I was speaking to a CEO of Rainmaker the other day. He said, I have to write the press releases. I have to write my own PowerPoints all the time. I should be presenting these to customers because my schedule is the bottleneck, not my brain, but my schedule to be in front of more people. So relieve the Rainmaker of those tasks is step number 1. Step number 2 is to scale that rainmaker by taking any repetitive messaging, that blah, blah, blah pitch that rainmakers and we all do all day long repeatedly. You scale that rainmaker by distilling that message down and scaling it through digital content, through video, through written content and other media, so that rainmaker never has to repeat themselves. That's where digital technology meets content can be really, really powerful. Third, we want to train the team, the marketers and other people around that rainmaker to support them. So we have a real strong team play to power up that rainmaker with like a robotic suit that surrounds them, rather than them look like, Bruce Willis coming out of a building in Die Hard. Bruce Willis can handle 1 building. A rainmaker can handle 1 or 2 large accounts per year. And so what we want to do is we want to change the paradigm from the Bruce Willis where we were bleeding out of our head by the end of the deal. Our suits are burned and we're tattered and torn and worn out. We want to be more like Tony Stark and Iron Man. We want to put rainmakers in an Iron Man suit surrounded by these digital tools and get them out so they can handle 20 deals at a time. That's where real breakthrough profitability and cash flow come from. And then finally, we want to train the next generation of rainmakers, but that's an 18 to 24 month process. You don't just hire people and they become rainmakers. That's really the big fallacy. Lead-based, marketing solves this problem. ABM solves this challenge. Not really, nor does hiring lots and lots of salespeople. But that's really been the responsive, reflexive way that we've tried to adapt in B2B. And frankly, it just doesn't work in these very, very large, complex deals.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And gosh, I just realized we're running out of time here. We have more content as usual than time, but I'll drop the link for the 7 challenges of enterprise deals and mega deals again in the chat. This has been kind of our premise for today. Maybe before we wrap up, Neil, any closing last thoughts?
Well, gosh, to zoom way back out and to eat the dog food here, let's do the right things. I'd offer that I've personally taken some time to look for my own calling in life, the purpose for which I work. That's helped me to make better decisions on who I work with and the types of customers that I want to work with. As I said, I'm really committed to accelerating the no carbon economy and working with energy companies now, moving a little bit away from IT and the B2B services world that I've been navigating for the past 30 years. And so, I'd add that to the mix, John. Purpose matters a lot. That's what brings inspiration to work. And if you're not inspired at work, please get in touch. There's hundreds and hundreds of super well-funded climate tech, green tech, energy tech customers and companies that have sprung up in the last 10 years. They're dying to meet talented B2B capable sales and marketing people. And it's been a pleasure to get to know this new community. And I'd love to be connecting our community with them so that we can have a big impact on the future and make a dent in this no carbon economy transition that's happening. It's bigger than the internet is. And so, that seems like a really great place to land, John. Have purpose. And the energy technology space is huge for us B2B sales and marketing leaders.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, Neil, I'm grateful that we were able to reconnect today, and Megan will be back next week. She was a little under the weather today, but back next week, and we've got another sales operations person who will be joining us next week, Brian Shea, who has a wealth of knowledge from a sales ops and revenue operations and strategy side of selling, which, as Megan and I were talking, we're like, we have a lot of marketers here, but getting people like Neil and Brian and other divergent viewpoints on what marketers can be doing from a sales perspective is so valuable. Neil, grateful for this article and really appreciate you making the time today.
Great, John. Thanks for having me.